It has taken the WNBA almost 28 years to get to the point where we are now. And this year, something clicked with the WNBA, and it's because of the draft of the players that came in. It's just not Caitlin Clark. It's Reese. We have so much talent out there that has been unrecognized. And I don't think we can just pin it on one player.
There has been, this phrase has been couched, hasn't it? The Caitlin Clark effect. Why do you think that has been the case?
Well, I want to be very diplomatic about this. It's just the structure of the way media plays out race. I'm going to be very honest. I feel really bad because I've seen so many players of color that are equally as talented, and they never got the recognition that they should have. And I think right now, it is time for that to happen. So last night, we read Time magazine where Caitlin Clark was named Athlete of the Year. Why couldn't they have put the whole WNBA on that cover and said, the WNBA is the league of the year because of all the talent that we have? Because when you just keep singling out one player, it creates hard feelings. And so now you're starting to hear stories of racism within the WNBA, and I don't want to hear that. We have got to operate and become stronger as a league and respect everybody that's playing and their talents.
Well, Callie Finn, it was just a week ago that you were here with me. That day, shortly before we recorded, we learned that Caitlin Clark was honored as the Time Athlete of the Year. And that news dropped shortly before we recorded. But of course, we talked about it and gave our initial reaction to it. And of course, everybody responded normally to that announcement, Callie. There was no big fuss over it. It was no big deal. She won the award. No, but that was Sheila Johnson, who you heard, an owner of the Mystics, the Washington Mystics. And I don't know if we'd be revisiting Caitlin's Time Athlete of the Year honor again this week, but for Sheila Johnson's comments, which seemed to well, I mean, I don't know, because there was a lot of commentary already around her winning the award, or it's not really an award, but the honor, receiving this honor from Time. But then a couple of days passed, I'm not sure how long, but then Sheila Johnson did this interview on CNN, and then the floodgates opened, and it's been, in general, Callie, in my opinion, interesting to watch sort of the reactions to this, because there was definitely some commentary in there where Caitlin, in the timepiece where Caitlin referenced or acknowledged white privilege, which we spoke about last week. And she said, look, I've earned everything. And we all know that and acknowledge that, and we're not trying to take that away from her. But she acknowledged that, white privilege does exist. And she talked a lot about the Black players and, wanting to support them and different things. And that seemed to get some people upset, Callie. So they were upset. Not everyone. There were some people who were very appreciative of what she said, like you and myself and others. And then there was a group of people who were not upset, who said they are no longer going to be Caitlin Clark fans. La la la, right? I'm trying to set the stage here. And so then Sheila Johnson goes on CNN. She makes these remarks, and now people say, see, this is why she shouldn't have even said that, because she can't please anybody. And so now it's just I don't know, Callie. It was just a lot, but I do think we need to unpack some of this. So I don't know where you'd like to begin, but that's sort of the landscape of her being honored for this honor in Time Athlete of the Year, which we both agree she deserves, makes total sense to us. But what do you make of this reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, like you mentioned, when we discussed this kind of spur of the moment, I think we were aware that some of those comments from Caitlin Clark were going to upset part of her base. And I think that's why it was so important for us to talk about how important those comments were and like kind of put them into context and things like that. And like you mentioned, the conversation just kind of, I don't know, went off the rails. I think the best thing that I can do to start that we didn't do in the last conversation is talk about the Time Athlete of the Year award or honor in itself, because that was something that I saw even in the segment that we just watched with the Mystics owner. Um, Eventually Cheryl Swoops is mentioned for like her reaction to learning that Caitlin Clark won the honor. And one of the first things that she says after a long pause is like, I wonder what the parameters were. And so I think let's talk about that. What I know is that Time magazine has done a Person of the Year honor for 97 years, and it's been selected by editors. And I'm just going to read their phrasing for how they have selected it for nearly 100 years.
And this is for person of the year.
Person of the year.
Okay.
But just flow with me for a second. We're gonna get there.
Okay.
So the parameters are for the individual who, for better or for worse, did the most to shape the world and the headlines over the past 12 months. In most years, that choice was not is a difficult one. They said in 2024 it was not, because this year it went to Donald Trump for Person of the Year. He wasn't the first, and this wasn't even his first time winning Person of the Year. So that hopefully clarifies. I mean, Donald Trump, convicted felon, but also president-elect. Like that probably is a layup in terms of somebody who shaped national discourse. Now let's think about Athlete of the Year. I think people are assuming that Athlete of the Year has been around for as long as Person of the Year, but it has not. They introduced Athlete of the Year in 2019. Okay, so this is not the same, but it stands to reason that they're using the same parameters to select the honoree. And you can think they've only had 5 Athletes of the Year. She's only the second basketball player to win the honor or to claim the honor. The other one was LeBron James. Other individual honorees, I mean, you have here, that's the U.S. women's national soccer team as a whole.
Which I think is important to Sheila Johnson's point. Don't lose your thought. But I think it's important, and when we go back and revisit that, because people were laughing at her. This is not a participation trophy. It's not a trophy at all, right? It's an honor. But I think, and I don't know this, but it's an assumption I'm making, that she's saying that because there is some precedent on some level to honor not just a single person, as was done with the U.S. women's national team. Now, it's not a league, but it's a team. Right? Yeah. So when people say it's an Athlete of the Year award, not a League of the Year award, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but there's precedent for not always honoring a single athlete. I'm not saying that I agree with her, but I'm saying it's not unprecedented either.
Yeah, and I want to say like the Wall Street Journal did something like that this year with the WNBA as a whole. Like they just honored the league as a whole for like an innovator award or something like that. So like there is precedent, like you mentioned, it's specifically with a Time award. The only thing I was going to say remaining is like some of the other individual honorees have been Simone Biles, Lionel Messi, and Aaron Judge. So like that's some context. But I do think, to your point about the U.S. women's national soccer team, their story was like an epic one, right? The way that they fought for gender equality and the way that they were being paid, having been the better team, between the men's and women's national soccer teams, like they advocated to make something right. And so I think that year that made sense. And I don't know if anybody was asking for my opinion, but I do think that, like, to what Sheila Johnson said, the WNBA would not have been the right call for this honor this year. Like, it makes sense for it to go to Caitlin Clark because she has shaped the headlines for better or for worse. Which
Assuming they're using the Person of the Year criteria, which we don't know.
Right. I don't know what else they would, and I think that makes sense here. Even when you look at when LeBron James won it, like it makes that, to me, applies. And so I think that otherwise you're like grasping for straws to try to figure out what the parameters are. And then like you would have to make up some parameters to say, well, this is why the league as a whole deserves it. Oh, because there's been so much progress in the league or what have you. Like that doesn't make sense. Like it makes sense to go based on what they've done in the past. What athlete, what person has driven the most headlines over the past 12 months? What have they done to shape the national or global discourse? And it's been Caitlin Clark. I think we even said that in our last conversation. So to me, it's like that makes sense. You can't, unfortunately, you cannot make the same argument for the WNBA. And I think that's part of what Sheila Johnson is trying to speak to. I think it would have been great if she would have like, because I think what it comes down to is she's implying that Caitlin Clark doesn't deserve the award or whatever we want to call it. We keep calling it an award, but that doesn't come off well after Caitlin Clark used the platform she was given to acknowledge that she does have white privilege, to talk about elevating Black women. Like it's super counterproductive to then go on CNN and be like, we need to elevate the league and all this stuff because it causes division. Like it just wasn't the right move, unfortunately. But like, I do think maybe her point is hopefully we get to the point where the WNBA is maybe at the same profile where it's not just Caitlin Clark above the rest. I can't put words into her mouth, but I'm thinking maybe that's what she was trying to get at.
Okay. So let me say at the outset that I don't agree with her that the WNBA as a league should have won it. Received the honor. But I do think she made a credible argument. And I don't think it should be dismissed the way people are dismissing it. And also, I think this is a case of probably, one, not the right messenger, which is what a lot of the commentary I saw was. Not the right messenger because some people do not perceive her to be the best owner and will say, well, you could have been doing more and you haven't. So, they, whatever the case may be, some people don't perceive her as the best owner. Also, the timing, like you said, Callie, it's just doing it right off the heels of Caitlin being honored like this and how gracious she was and finally being so strong in her commentary, the way that some have called on her to do or have liked her to do and wanted her to do long before. It's just not great timing either. That being said, she said a lot of things when she was in that interview. And I do think it's important not to just sort of, because some people are like, do you agree with her? Like I have people like messaging me, well, agree with what? Because I do agree with some of the things she said in there, right? Like I don't agree with the premise that the league should have won, but that's not the only thing she talked about in there. She talked about how media treats the Black players versus, or players of color. We've been talking about that all year. And it's not just a this year thing. It is the history of the WNBA, right? And so women's basketball, not just the WNBA. So I agree with her sentiment around that. When she says, when you keep singling out a single person and it, I don't think resentment was the word that she used, but she says like, it starts to cause issues or singling out, whatever language she used. I'm sorry? Division, right? The issue I have with her using that language is because it suggests that players were not happy about her getting this honor, right? And I haven't seen anything to indicate that. I don't know if she's speaking from personal knowledge of someone she's spoken to, but I feel like there was a conflating of issues that have been going on that she used to make this argument. And so now it also doesn't put the Black players, and I'm saying Black because that's what this is usually about, in the best position because, now people can walk away from that thinking, oh, see, they're jealous that she won the award or, So I think there was some conflating of things. I think what Black players want is to get the same opportunities, right? They're all athletes, so no one wants a participation trophy. And so these are the professional athletes competing at the highest level there is. So they want to win and they want to be honored. The same way Caitlin Clark said she didn't want to make the Olympic team in that timepiece without it like earning it. None of these players want to get that award like as the participation kind of trophy, if you will. So I just wish she would have been a little bit more thoughtful about her commentary. But when she says it wasn't only Caitlin Clark, it was Angel Reese, and she uses an example, many people brought up the fact that when Clark went to play in DC, that they had to move to a bigger arena. Well, they also had to do that for Angel Reese. And I think that's her point. I'm not saying that Angel Reese should have been the Time Athlete of the Year, but I think those points that she's making are valid in that there were plenty of people contributing to that. And there were people like Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson, who served as faces of the league, who built a lot of momentum leading up to this. There were other factors at play. There's also the fact that look at how well the WNBA finals did. The ratings are there. The proof is there. That didn't involve Caitlin Clark at all. So obviously there's interest in the league that is not just due to her. And we've been saying that all year. I'm not saying that interest warrants receiving a Time Athlete of the Year honor, but what I am saying, what she said is correct. And I think that's what I interpreted as, is like she wanted all of that to be acknowledged. I don't know if the Time Athlete of the Year award is the right honor for that, like you said, but I don't think that the condescension that I've seen and the dismissiveness of her that I've seen is also appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to circle back to something you said, because you mentioned there are a lot of things that Sheila Johnson mentioned, and then you mentioned like the opportunities. I think specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, the opportunities she was referring to were like sponsorships and things like that. She spoke about some of the sponsorships that Caitlin Clark had. And so, I mean, I don't, like you said, I just don't feel like that. It's kind of like conflating. We're putting together some things that don't really need to be put together right now. And it's like bringing up conversations that are relevant and important, but like not in the scope of this specific honor, or I don't even know if that's the right word for it. Like, I think that it's something. I think that what it is, it's a really great way to start conversations like the one that we're having right now. I think even with Donald Trump as Person of the Year, like I read that the piece that they did with him, and they asked him a lot of questions about his plans and how is he going to lower prices for groceries, because those are things that he ran on. And then he's in the story being like, well, that's going to be pretty hard. It's hard to raise price. And like, so then a core part of his base is stands to be upset or at least interested in what Time was able to pull out of this very interesting and pivotal figure. It's the same thing with this Caitlin Clark story. She said a lot of stuff, and we didn't even talk about the last time we spoke. Like she spoke about Angel Reese. She said that they're not friends, but they're cordial. Like there are so many things to pull from that could upset or be of interest to the core base of Caitlin Clark and or Donald Trump. And I think that, I mean, nobody's arguing that Kamala Harris should have won Time Person of the Year or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think that though, while that would have been probably a really interesting piece, like, I think that maybe we need to look at this Time Awards as like just intriguing, interesting pieces and an opportunity to start a discussion about people that we've already been talking about all year. Like, to me, I don't think it's anything deeper than that.
Right. We're putting a lot of weight in it. And so it adds, I guess, to this discourse, or makes it such polarizing discourse. You know, it's interesting because I was thinking about this. Caitlin Clark is not anything she's done or said, but the topic, what she represents to different people, she's so polarizing. And usually people who are polarizing, they say and do things that are polarizing, but she really doesn't. She doesn't say and do things that are really polarizing, and yet she is so polarizing, which she's acknowledged she knows, but she's like, I'm really not. So it's just like an interesting, sort of thing. I think the only other comment I want to make about this with respect to the criteria is being that it's only been around, is it 5 years you said? No, it's long. How, 6 years?
2019. So what is that?
So it's 2024. So that would be 9 years. So 5 years, I think, right?
Yeah.
This is 6th year. This is 6th year. Okay.
Oh,
19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Yeah. Okay, this is the sixth year. I'm sorry. Let me just count it out. Yes,
Oh, no,
make
you're
sure.
right though. You're right though, because there were 5 individual athletes, but the U.S. women's national team threw us off. We're good. We're fine.
Whatever, I don't care. I wanted to just get the figure right. So it's still relatively new. And I think I do, there were a lot of people talking about, like, if you look at, and I don't know who all the others are. I think you said some names. I don't remember everyone who was on the list. So I don't know if this applies to all, but a lot of what I saw for people is she hasn't won anything. And I think, like, some of the others have won a championship, or the U.S. women's national team, whatever they won in the year that they got the honor. And so, but it was very clear to me that she was receiving this. Obviously, she broke a lot of records and did a lot of great things on the basketball court, but it was more about her overall impact on the game and the sport, which is why she was getting, this Time Athlete of the Year this year. So that seemed pretty clear to me. I think what will be interesting in the future is to see if they will be consistent with that, or if it will evolve, and if the award will grow. So for the people who were challenging it on that basis, like I said, it just seems to me clear to me the criteria that was used. The criteria isn't clear, but that this was not just about, on-court play and if you won a championship. It was about impact that went beyond the court, right? And so, and that's Time's right to do that. So I really don't question that. I don't have a problem with that being the criteria. But what I will say is, I hope, there's only been 2 basketball players, so I hope that they will continue to look at, like, the league, the WNBA, and I think of this, I'm sort of equating it to, like, it's a little bit different, but like how Major League Baseball just acknowledged the Negro Leagues, right? And how when Caitlin Clark was breaking the record in college, the scoring record, how there were a lot of people saying, like, well, this is not fair. She didn't break the scoring record because there are players whose records are not acknowledged by the NCAA, or, whatever the case may be. And my point is not to rehash all of that, but it's to say, a lot of times with leagues, they acknowledge things much, much later down the road. So there were a lot of people, like when the Negro Leagues, for example, started to be acknowledged, a lot of people were like, still like, whatever, it took it's too little too late, or it took long enough. Some people were still happy about it, like that was the right thing to do. But I do hope that one day we get to a place where we really acknowledged what it is that was done in the WNBA before all of these new players came. Because while Caitlin and Angel and all of these players are helping to build and grow this league, Dawn Staley and all these pioneers of the past, the inaugural people who started the league, what they did was tremendous. They started a women's league, right? And for years, women, predominantly Black women, have had to carry a league where people refuse to support it because it's majority Black, because they have a high queer population. And I feel like the way history always works is sometime later down the road, this will be acknowledged, maybe not even in our lifetime, but it's like, let's give people their flowers while they're here now, right? Let's give them their flowers, because there are many women in the league, not necessarily for Athlete of the Year, but there are many women past and present who've helped to build and shape this league who should be acknowledged. And I was really glad to hear Caitlin Clark say that. We know that Maya Moore is her favorite player. And so I love the respect and reverence she has for those who came before her. I wish people would not get so upset when she acknowledges that. And I hope that others can learn to have that same reverence as well.
Yeah. Something that you said made me do some looking on my phone. So excuse me for maybe looking off the side, but you had mentioned, like, previous Time Athletes of the Year, likely won a championship of some sort or something like that. So I just looked into it. Simone Biles won in 2021, and that was my inclination. That was the year that she had the twisties. She pulled out at some point of the Olympics and sparked a national conversation about mental health.
Yeah.
Then LeBron James won in 2020. We know what type of year 2020 was, and he was pretty vocal at the time about like Black Lives Matter, voting, and he also led the Lakers to the championship that year. So then Aaron Judge, I looked through. I'm not really sure about why Aaron Judge won.
I'm saying that was the argument online from people. I wasn't making that argument. It feels like these awards are about more than just you won a championship, is what I'm saying.
Right. I think it's supposed to be about your impact, except for maybe with Aaron Judge, because I just don't know what that would have been. But like, who knows? Maybe I'm missing it. But I think to your point, and maybe this is going to be a little bit controversial, what I'm about to say. But I mean, I've been have a hot take or two. I don't even want to say this. This is not going to go over well, but I do wonder because if you think about it, just Caitlin Clark's impact was with like her play, right? Like it was drawing people to watch the sport. I do think though, Angel Reese made a similar impact with some of the things that she did off the court. And like we have seen people do like joint awards for them, and that's not gone over well. So I don't know if I'd recommend that, but I do know like we saw what was it, the Sporting News honored both Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark like at the same time for what was normally an individual award. I could see the case for that. And I'm not trying to make it. I'm just saying I could see the case based on just going through the previous honorees or whatever you want to call them, because it seems like they are often looking for like what was the impact off of the court or off the field or the scope of play. But then again, they've shown a range. Aaron Judge to LeBron James in 2020 to Simone Biles. So I mean, I think ultimately they're justified in their choice. So maybe I'll just land there. That's not controversial at all. They're definitely justified, but I do see how maybe there were other options, and I don't necessarily think that those other options were necessary. I think that where we landed is a good place because, like I said previously, it forced us to have some conversations that we'll continue having. I do want to say, because it feels like we're wrapping up. I saw a lot of people saying that like nobody came to Caitlin Clark's defense, right? Like they felt like maybe she was being attacked by Sheila Johnson. And in some ways, I do understand that. I don't want to be dismissive. That's something that you mentioned. Like you never wanted to dismiss anybody's perspectives. Yep. Some people said that maybe felt like Sheila Johnson was attacking Caitlin Clark by saying that, implying maybe she didn't deserve the time recognition. I think that's a perfect word, recognition. And so maybe, however you may feel about that, I will argue though that there were a lot of people that came out of the woodwork to Caitlin Clark's defense, if that's even the word. We had Lexi Brown, WNBA player, speak out. Had her teammate, or former teammate, because now she's a Valkyrie, Timmy Finlay, speak out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think that like those things are important too, because like when you're trying to shape a narrative about like, oh, Caitlin Clark's trying to, put this league on her back and defend these people, and they can't even return the favor. They can't even defend her. Like, you just made that up. Like, let's not make things up. You know what I mean? Like, there were plenty of people who came and spoke to the contrary.
Well, it's always been a made-up thing, and that's the thing. Like, people like to make up things, or just ignore certain context, And so, like I said, I'm not here to really give any more context because we've been doing it all season, and I'm just exhausted from it. But it's the lawyer in me. To me, everything is often gray. And so people, again, this was just another thing where people were very like staunch on one side or the other. And I just think a lot of points were made all around. And while I don't agree with all of them either way, I think a lot of points were made. I'm really hoping next season's coverage of the WNBA can improve. I mean, I'm really hoping for it. I'm skeptical, but I'm really, really hoping for it. You brought up Angel Reese, and we talked about the schedule releases when they happen. The league scheduled Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, so the Chicago Sky and the Indiana Fever, 5 times in one regular season to see each other. So when you talk about the impact that Angel Reese has, and it's not just her, because I saw all these posts and things about how Caitlin Clark's final game of her college career outperformed Major League Baseball. But South Carolina was a part of that. What Dawn Staley has done for women's basketball cannot be understated. And what she's for a long time, right? And so if it was not the Gamecocks on the other side of that, many times, if it wasn't Angel Reese opposite of Caitlin Clark, she would have still gotten big ratings. That is not what I'm suggesting. But look at the games that are played without Angel Reese, the numbers don't compare, right? And that's not just here. Make of that what you will, but I'm just saying they're tied together. They're linked together, right? Just like we just heard the college game with UConn and Notre Dame. And yes, that's a long-standing rivalry, but it's the highest rated college game this season. UConn's very popular, yet it was a game versus Notre Dame, Hannah Hidalgo, Paige Beckers, right? And so what I'm saying is, and I'm not even actually, I want to be clear because I'm not suggesting that's a race thing, but what I'm saying is many times who the person is on the other side, whether it's a personal individual rivalry, a team rivalry, school rivalry, whatever it is, they matter. And when people dismiss the other person or the other team like they don't matter, we have to stop doing that. Yes, yeah. like Caitlin Clark is not unique in sports. She is. But what I mean by that, there's always a player or an athlete that's sort of like what I call a mega star, a rock star, like they transcend the sport, right? In NBA, that's LeBron and Steph, and some would argue Katie, right? But it's like, we just saw like the NBA ratings are down, but when Steph Curry plays, the ratings are like, they jump, they skyrocket. Still, the man is 37, however old Steph Curry is, right? He's a rock star. I always say, if my grandmother knows you, who's not into sports knows who you are, or someone's grandmother knows you, you've sort of transcended the sport. But just because those players exist, we don't ignore Jason Tatum and Joel Embiid and all of the other stars. So yes, Caitlin Clark, she transcends. She's a megastar. She's a rock star. But that doesn't negate Nafisa Collier and Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. And I would say Angel Reese is probably crossed over to that rock star level. I was in New York at the Liberty playoff series, and I came outside and saw Angel Reese get in a car, and she was like being swarmed, okay? So I do think she's transcending soon. But that's a conversation for another day. But there are athletes that do that. But we don't need to minimize the others because their star is not as big. They're all a part of the collective pie that helps make this league great and is helping it to grow.
But I think to your point, and this is so important, I'm really glad that you brought it up. You talk about Caitlin Clark's popularity, even in college when positioned against Angel Reese. Something Caitlin Clark said in the Time article that we didn't get to mention last time. She was like, why didn't they talk about LSU winning in terms of the media coverage of that NCAA tournament championship win for Angel Reese and LSU? Because if you remember, that was not the discourse afterward. No. It was about, this celebration and taunting Caitlin Clark and, that's classless and all this stuff. It got lost. That
they also didn't talk about South Carolina winning either.
And that's where I was about to land too. South Carolina completed an undefeated season by winning the championship against Caitlin Clark and Iowa. But that was completely lost. I mean, I vividly remember it because I was working in the national media at the time. Now I'm a local reporter, but I was working in the national media thinking, wow, this has just completely gone under the radar. It's the headlines are dominated by Caitlin Clark's season ending. And in some ways that's understandable because it's she had accomplished so much. She had set these records, college scoring records, NCAA tournament records. And so it's you want to recognize that, but there's got to be room for both, as you just said.
And what the Gamecocks did was greatness.
Absolutely.
They have
And
not,
like-
have they even lost more than 5 games in the last like total, like over like 4 or 5 seasons? I don't even know if I can get to 2 hands with how many games they've lost. This is, if we talk about it with like when the Patriots in football are dominant, when the Warriors were undefeated for a season, right? Like if this were another team, another player, another sport, it would be talked about without there being a mega star on the team, right? Yeah. And that's when people talk about the biases that exist, whether they're conscious or not, because South Carolina is a predominantly Black team in women's basketball, and we know some of the things have been said about that team before, that Dawn Staley has addressed in the media.
Yeah, but I think to that point, like I think maybe that's the most important part of this conversation is like we absolutely can and should acknowledge Caitlin Clark and her impact on the game.
Absolutely.
And how fun she is to watch and the things that she's accomplished, while also acknowledging some of the things that we just spent like the whole last however long talking about. So I don't want to rehash, but like I think that that's really important, and I hope that that kind of lingers into, like you mentioned, next season.
Right. And that's what she called for in her time piece. So I encourage her supporters, her fans, those that might feel like she's not supported in this league, in this community by the players. I don't believe Caitlin Clark feels like that. She hasn't expressed that sentiment. So I would say follow Caitlin Clark's lead. Follow her lead. Listen to her words and follow what she says. Callie, thanks for joining me today. Really, really, really great and important discussion.
Thanks, Nat.